Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Prog Report podcast. Another special episode here. We like to do these from time to time. We'd like to welcome our special guest, Mr. Jon Kirkman, back to the show. This time on video. Hey, Jon, how are you, man?
I'm fine, man. How are you?
I'm good. And, of course, Jeff Bailey returns after a little hiatus. You've missed a few.
Of course, Jeff Bailey.
Of course, Jeff Bailey.
You've missed Jeff. You've missed some. You slacker.
He's missed a few, yeah. He's been busy with actual work. But the reason why we're getting together here is because recently, actually about a few days ago, was the 30th anniversary of the Yes Union album. And we're recording this a few days later, but we still thought it was worth doing and talking about because it's just one of those albums that many years later is super divisive. I mean, there's some people that really have a problem with it. There's people that look at it in a much better light than when it came out. I'm one of those people. I actually like it a lot more now, personally. But I thought, there's the tour, there's the two generations of bands grouping together and everything that went with that. So it's a fun story, and really two experts on here joining the podcast, which is the two of you. I mean, I'm fairly familiar with Yes and the particulars, but not like the two of you. So I refer to you guys on all Yes things.
Well, John's much closer to it than I am, but
yeah.
I do my best.
But
you do a great job, Jeff.
I want to talk to Jon just real quick because last time we actually were in person, Jon, was over 2 years ago on the last Cruise to the Edge, which is insane.
Is it that long? Oh, that's crazy.
Is that incredible? Yeah. And the next one is a year away, so it'll be 3 years since we've been on the cruise, and it seemed like it was something that was just a given every year, And you did about 6 or 7, I think, from the first one, right?
I've done them all. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that was going to be the 7th. Yeah.
We're really excited, and you'll be on board, and as the host, and I'll be there, following your coattails as the co-host there, and like we've done in the years past, which is always so much fun. Really, it's the best thing.
It is. It's great fun. People think that it is work, and it's hard work, but when hard work is fun, it ain't hard work, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, it's silly to complain about. Oh, I gotta go because I gotta do something with Marillion coming up, and then I gotta go meet Yes. I just don't have time to eat lunch. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Eating times become a movable feast. No pun intended. Yeah, and the things, the minute you get on the ship, when I get my schedule, as you know yourself, when you get your schedule, you go to the production office and go, oh, by the way, that's changed.
Right. Every morning.
Every single one.
Yeah. So we meet in the production office at early, like 7, 8 a.m. on each day, and go over what's going on for today, thinking that at 11 o'clock will be this band that we have to maybe do a Q&A, and at 1 is this band to introduce, and it's all gone to hell, and things have moved around, and then there's the bartering, right? So like, hey, I'll do this interview if you do this one for me later.
Yeah, well, I can't do this because I'm doing this here. But I can finish that early and then do that there for you while you're doing that. Or, and there's normally, then the great thing is we normally get time on shore at the various stuff, which is great. And, but other than that, there's a lot of horse trading goes on. And it is hard work. I mean, like you. I mean, we work. A lot of people think we're on holiday, which is very nice. If you find me a job that pays me to go on holiday, I'll do it. But we're working 16, sometimes 18 hours a day.
Yeah, it's funny. Again, it's like complaining because it is the funnest work, but you don't really get to watch a lot of the shows doing what we do. You're really just running from one thing to another, and what we do is maybe just pinpoint 3 or 4 that we really want to see, that we might be like, listen, could you just give me 6 to 7, 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. so I can watch Steve Hackett? Yeah. Just let me do that, and then you're like, all right,
yeah. I mean, having said that, it is better than digging a hole in
100%. No, there's no complaining.
Wednesday, you know what I mean?
There's no complaining.
We love what we do. We're very lucky.
Yeah, it's a blast. And one day we got to get Jeff on the ship, but he keeps fighting me on it because he doesn't want to fly over.
As I told
what's
you,
wrong with you?
as I told you, you were working hard. I turned 50 in 2020, and that was going to be the year.
That was
And
the year.
boy, am I
Yeah.
glad I didn't buy tickets. Boy, am I
Right.
glad I didn't
Actually, that
listen
was
to you.
the year it got canceled. You're right. You're not kidding. But anyway,
we must get you on that ship. We got to get you on that ship, man.
We do. We got to get him on one year. It's well, there's news about the cruise. There's not much we can reveal right now, but there's going to be some lineups and more news and things coming in the next months ahead. So everybody just follow Cruise to the Edge on Facebook. That's the best place to find out information.
And I'm going to be making a film as well on the banks of the Mersey. Not quite as glamorous as the banks of the Caribbean, but you'll get the message. And I'm doing one of those. I'm speaking to Larry. We're going to knock it about and see what we can and can't mention, because a lot of people don't realize that the sort of hard work goes into something like this. All the T's and all the I's have to be crossed in contracts and signed off before we can announce anything. So it's just a matter. Look, we waited 2 years. What's waiting another month? Okay, it's not till next year.
Certainly not a big deal. Yeah, that's right.
No.
We just want it to happen, which, man, it's really looking like it might. So let's just keep our fingers crossed.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, so moving on to the topic, which is union. Jeff, I'd like to get you started on your familiarity with the history of it and how it got started, how we got to union in the first place.
Well, I imagine if people are watching this, they probably know the story, but obviously, Big Generator, or 90125, in fact, line up with Trevor Rabin, Chris Squire, Tony Kaye, Alan White, John Anderson. Follow up, Big Generator took quite a long time to make, followed by a world tour that ended in 1988. And at that point, John decided that he didn't want to do that anymore, and he went off to make an album and made that with Rupert Wakeman and Howe. Really great album. I was actually listening to it today as well, the Anderson, Rupert Wakeman, Howe album, followed by a world tour. And then, as I understand, that band then set out to make their second album and did a certain amount of recording, brought in Jonathan Elias as a producer. And I think probably from that point onwards, it certainly from what I've read in the magazines, and John might cast more light on it, but there seems to be lots of contrasting opinions on what happened there. Safe to say that Arista, the label who had ABWH, managed to get Yes being an 8-man lineup, so bringing the American side over, and producing an album from material that ABWH had recorded as their second album, plus stuff that the Yes West, or the American side, were working on. And it got put together, probably an album that I think in retrospect, very few of the band members view with any fondness. But I suppose as a fan, all of that story really didn't emerge until an awful lot later. For me, in 1991, I bought the CD. It seemed like a great idea. For me, it was a great album. I really enjoyed it. And there were probably a few things that I maybe didn't like about it at the time. In fact, the other day, I was telling Roy, I found a review of it that I wrote for a Yes fanzine back in the day. A good old Yes Music Circle, for I'm sure some of the people watching remember it.
Tis Hayes magazine, isn't it?
Tis indeed. And my review, I'll not read you the whole thing, but it starts as, the title of it is Rick Barely Gets a Look In. And the first line, the first sentence of the review is, "Where's Rick Wakeman?" and do the ABWH songs really need 12 keyboard players in addition to Rick? A major disappointment. Now, I do conclude, my biggest surprise is how remarkably consistent the album is. I think, I'm just thankful that the entire 8-man lineup didn't actually attempt to play on every track, because sometimes less is more. So that was my view of it at the time. And I suppose a lot of stuff came out afterwards about how it got put together. The tour followed. I can remember being a 21-year-old student, going to try and find tickets. I'm not even sure how probably was phoning something up in those days, and finding that the only seat I could get in Wembley Arena was very high up and very far away, and decided with my student budget that I wasn't going to do it, and so I never got to see the tour.
Yeah, John, what's, where do you look at this album and sort of the backlash between the members and
background to it? Personally, I think the Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman, Howe album is a really good album, but I think it's encased in amber now, and the reason it is because of the recording techniques and the hardware they use. You have to remember, keyboards in 1988, 89 were making huge inroads, and it was changing daily. And of course, it wasn't great, but everybody wanted in on the new technology. So I think that's the only problem. The production techniques and some of the hardware that they used on that album. I think the songs are really good. And I'm going to get damned by people who love the ABWH album. I do love it, but I think it would be great if they could re-record it on these stripped back, use real drums, maybe use some different keyboards on it. The Union thing came about, and it was put together by, I can tell you exactly who put it together, John Anderson, Brian Lane, and Clive Davis. And Steve, Bill, and Tony Levin were already recording in the south of France. And Bill said it sounded great. And then we came in, we were told, stop, we're doing a Union with the rest of the guys in Yes, and it's going to be great, it's going to be this. I think one of the reasons why John told me, he said, I couldn't make another album with ABWH. So I thought, why don't we get all this big band together and do it as Yes? Which in theory was, not a silly idea when you think about it. Mm-hmm. 8 great musicians. Yep. I suppose people would think it got messy on stage. It didn't. It was really good. There were a couple of times when Steve wasn't on stage for some of the Yes West things, but generally speaking, and again, as Chris said, I said, well, I played bass all the way through, so it was never a problem for me. So he said, yeah, I was quite happy doing it. But the album, I know, again, Trevor, it sounds like I'm name dropping it because, I work with Yes a lot. And Trevor told me that he said there was the engineer, the guy who produced it, Jonathan Elias, he said, he's a good guy, I know him, and he's done a lot of great work, but he said, he didn't feel he was getting the right performances, which is why he brought other people in, and he didn't like that. And I said, well, what, 10? It's got 10 credits for synthesizer players, really? Right. You don't think Rick hasn't played a synthesizer before? He said, well, no, but he said, what I can tell you is that Chris went over and sang on some of the ABWH tracks, and John came and sang on the Yes West tracks. But he said, other than that, he said it was Yes on those Yes West tracks, no foreign bodies. But again, to recap on the ABWH, a lot of people were saying, well, why not bring Chris in and make it Yes? Well, I can tell you that Bill Bruford vetoed that idea. And he told me that he vetoed that idea. So that's why it didn't happen. But I think the Union album could do with a remix now.
Definitely.
And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just think that because it's like, let's face it, how long ago now? Nearly 30 years, goodness me.
Yeah.
When I think of the hot dinners I've had since then, crazy. But yeah, time moves on. And again, at the time, studio techniques, and really, I guess a lot of it must have been done almost remotely. It must have been patched together because obviously those 4 songs were woven into the songs that ABWH did. We also have to remember that Steve got a Grammy nomination for Masquerade, which is that's a good sign in my thing. So it's not the sort of dismal failure that everybody seems to think
you had Lift Me Up, I remember being a hit at radio, at least in the US.
Yeah.
And I think you're right, though. The thing that sticks out for me the most is just the production, especially on the Howe material, is where the production really is bad for me. I just hate that the whole drum sound. Because I love some of those songs, Would Have Waited Forever, Shock to the System.
Well, that's a great. That is a great opening track.
They're great songs.
It comes in with that and you go, wow, that's really good. And then
once the drums and bass come in, they just sound so.
Yeah. I originally thought Shock to the System was a Yes West song, and I said, I thought that, and Trevor said, yeah, I know why you think that, but he said it's not. He said it's kind of a Yes West by numbers, but he said. Yeah, he said they do it well. Don't get me wrong, but He said it's no, he says it's not a Yes West song. He said at all, but he said it's good, and he said it changed a little bit live as well. There was a bit more put into it live in terms of bottom end and a bit of boot into it, you know. So, but there were some great songs on that album. But you know, again, time tells you this. I mean, I've just done an interview with Denny Sywell, who's the original drummer in Wings, founder member, about the new the Ram album. When Ram came out, everybody hated McCartney. They hated the album, and now it's seen as one of the best McCartney albums ever. And I think time does that. It is. Time does that with albums. I mean, I remember I went to see Tales from Topographic Oceans live, and unfortunately, when I went to see them in Liverpool, the album hadn't been released. So I said to Chris Squire, I said, I'm sat there. Bear in mind, I'm 15, and at 15, you're very impatient. And I'm sat there thinking, well, there's something great. I mean, they started off with Close to the Edge, the entire Close to the Edge album. Here's our new album. And after that, I said, once you got into the second song, I'm thinking, when are you going to play something I know? You know, and he laughed at that. He thought that was really funny, but he said, yeah, we were going to make him have it. He said, I could see some people in the front row around about the third side nodding off, you know. But I mean, really, in hindsight, it was a great show. But I remember feeling at the time, oh, yeah, something I know.
I think where you are as a fan, how old you are, that kind of thing, looking at Union really changes your view of it, though, right? Because if you grew up, you know, and you're a teenager during Cruise to the Edge, I mean, not Cruise to the Edge, Close to the Edge and the big albums, then maybe Union doesn't sit well right off the bat. But honestly, I was 16 when Union came out, and I loved, you know, 90125 and Big Generator and knew the Yes hits, and this was just, oh, cool, another new album. I didn't know the story. I didn't research the story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
I mean, I've had privileged information, so I know what was going on at that time because I was working. So I have privileged information, but it doesn't mean that I like or dislike the album. I mean, I love the albums, and some albums, as you know, are very instant, and some albums take time to grow. And it's only when you think, oh, I really like this album, you think, oh, God, it's 10 years old, you know. Yeah, and I think that's a good thing, because I think it gives the album a longer life rather than something that's instant and then you never play it again. You know, whereas you play it solidly for a month and then never play it again. Whereas Union, I always come back to, and every time that I would have waited forever because I go, yes, this is why I love this album. Yeah. You know, there's so much good stuff in there.
I think that's one of the things for me, and you sort of alluded to it, Roy, that, you know, it was it was the time where, you know, you didn't have the entire history of music available to you on a mobile device. So when you bought a CD, you chose it carefully, you listened to it from, you know, the whole way through lots of times, you got really familiar with it, and, you know, you stuck with stuff, you know. But I have to say, I mean, you know, we talked about, you know, Lift Me Up and I would have waited forever. You know, there are actually some, I mean, given we are the Prog Report, there are some quite proggy moments in, you know, Silent Talking and Holding On, and, you know, there are, you know, time signature bits, little more complicated bits that they don't get massively fully realized, but there's a lot of depth in there, as opposed to just, you know, maybe, you know, some of the things that, you know, and the tracks that people maybe ignore or overlook or kind of didn't get played live and stuff like that. The thing for me about it was, the other thing about it is the kind of the solo tracks. Masquerade, you mentioned, there's a little Even song, the Levin and Bruford kind of little duet piece, and then there's Anchor Wat as well, which is there's a little bit of vocal in it. You know, there's little sort of nods like that to kind of, you know, the sort of the past Yes albums as well. And, you know, it looked like a Yes album, and it, you know, it certainly did. To me, it sounded like a Yes album.
It did, yeah.
And,
well, I mean, I also like some of the other Raven songs. You know, The More We Live is great. Even Saving My Heart. I mean, you know, kind of hokey pop song, but catchy. And Miracle of Life is great.
Bear in mind, though, did you know that none of those 4 Yes West songs were ever going to be Yes songs? It was only because I've got 4 songs here.
Right.
Because Clive Davis asked him to write some songs for ABWH, and he refused point blank. And he said, I'm not getting involved with that. And that's after that. And he thought, well, what if we get everybody together? But I think the 4 songs that the Yes West did very much a continuation of Big Generation 90125.
Totally.
And I get that. But as a fan, and you'll know this as well, you listen to the album once, and then once you get into the second and third listen, you're listening for the subtleties. And if you listen hard, you always get them then. And yes, I've always had that. Yes, I've always had those little touches. You think, oh yeah, that's the Yes signature. And you always get that after about the second or third, because when you play it first time around, you just listen to the album as a whole. But when you start listening more deeply, usually on headphones as well, that's when you get, oh yeah, this is why I love this.
Yeah. Well, some of the stuff I was two things. Some of the stuff that I was reading about the album, I would have waited forever. And one of the things I read about it said that they actually, if you listen to it this way, they tried to make the opening of it a bit like Starship Trooper. So if you think about the kind of I would have waited forever, there is that kind of like Starship Trooper, a big chord and the vocal little nods. The second thing, I got the album on vinyl this week for the very first time.
Wow.
It's green screen in there, but actually, but again, hearing it not as a CD, I played side one, great, flipped it over. The first track on side two is The Miracle of Life. That's a real album side opener of a track, and it was like, wow, this is it kind of hit me really well.
Do you not think though the Miracle of Life sounds like it could have been on the first ABWH album?
Yeah,
as a song. Yeah, I really, totally. I mean, there's so many good points on there, but I don't think there was a bad song on the Union album. Yeah. I know Rick was famously quoted as saying "onion," and I can understand why, because he's probably thinking, "Hang on, where am I?" But I think in terms of the songs, I really don't think that it could be faulted.
No, actually, I mean, it's way more listenable than I remembered. I remember even liking it back then, but then sort of time passes and all you do is read about how everybody hates the record, and that sort of distorts things. And then I went and started listening to it again because of this, and I'm like, no, I actually still like it. It's not bad. And it
was yes in 1991. You don't want, what I would not have wanted in 1991 was Yes doing a rehash of Close to the Edge or Fragile. The band had moved on. And again, the Union album was a very subtle move on from Big Generation 90125 and the Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman, Howe, although I think some of the songs could have gone on. You can see somewhere some of the Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman songs are, but I think it's very much Yes in 1991, and there's nothing wrong with that. I don't actually think it's dated as much as the Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman, Howe album. I think it's still a little more in your face than that one. And again, the songs, I find that with a lot of 80s artists. In the 80s, everybody wanted to use this new technology, and it just basically traps them in amber because it's that's the 80s. The production techniques give it away. And I was surprised that Jon, but then again, Jon has always been a very, hey, I want to use the new technology. I want to do this. He wanted to be cutting edge. That's cool. Bill Bruford was another one. And so Steve, they were all wanting to move it forward. And that's always been the signature thing of Yes. I always say this, Chris Squire's song's great. Onward. That really should be what you would say, that word. That's Yes. Onward. And I think Union is definitely, was at the time, the next step.
What about the tour? Let's talk a little bit about that, because I didn't get to see it, and Jeff, you didn't either, you said.
No.
So Jon, tell us what the tour was, because the one thing everybody says about this record and this whole period is that the album was hit or miss, but everybody seems unanimous that they enjoyed the shows.
All the band loved the shows. Bill Bruford told me to, and this is after they'd done the first big run. He said we were doing the second run across America, and I point out, why don't we do some different songs? He said, stupidly, I should have known. He said, if you're a small band, you don't have a massive production like Yes did. You can do that. He said, I'm sure Bono and The Edge decide what the set list is, and if they want to stick something in, the other two guys go with it. He said, we couldn't. We were encased in this concrete, coffin, as it were. And he said, we couldn't change it because of the lighting cues and the big production and everything else. He said, it was then that I thought, okay, I get it. So he wasn't happy about that. He wanted to do some newer songs, but the rest of the band had a good time. And Bill said he had a great time as well. I think it enabled them to do a lot of material they hadn't done for a while, and of course the new material which they'd not done. And I think they were all involved in that. And if you look at the DVD, which is again coming out as part of a box set, they're all smiling. They're having a good time on that stage, and it seemed like they did. You know, John's cracking his jokes, his normal jokes. I mean, John's always been cracking jokes like that. I remember when they played at the Liverpool Empire, John was going, "Can't believe Ken Dodd stood here." Ken Dodd was a very famous comedian in England from Liverpool. And he said, "Ken Dodd was stood here, right here." You know, he's got a very finely tuned northern sense of humor, as John. But the show just, I mean, for me, it didn't last long enough. It's like no sooner they started, it finished. That's a good sign. So I had to see him again. But, you know,
what was the opening song for the show? You remember?
No Disgrace.
Yours No Disgrace, yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. The usual
kind
of number.
And I hadn't heard that for ages. And I remember saying, I think it's saying to my mate, it's like, I haven't heard this for years and years. And it was quite funny because when they were out doing, The Ladder, I said, I said to Chris, I said, look, I'd love to hear you do Yours Is No Disgrace again. He said, well, it's your lucky night because we're doing it in the set. So I said, after years and years and years, and then you do, you start doing it regularly. But the whole thing was very, very well done. And of course, I thought, oh God, 8 musicians on the stage. I mean, because you got 2 keyboards, 2 guitarists, plus you got 1 bass player and 1 singer, but you got 2 drummers as well. Although I think Bill was adding a lot of color to the thing. But I mean, let's face it, Alan White is a wonderful, wonderful drummer, very solid, but he's also capable of all that fast sort of, sort of rhythmically intricate stuff as well. And Bill is as well. But, I think they complemented each other on this tour. And you would never think that they would, because they're both diametrically opposed in terms of style.
Yeah.
But they work very well together.
But did they play a lot at the same time, or they switched on and off?
No, they all played at the same time. Steve went off a couple of times. I don't think Steve was on stage for Owner of a Lonely Heart and a couple of others. And then Steve did his solo, of course. And then the irony was that Trevor did. Trevor's a big fan of Shakti, the John McLaughlin band, and Solly's Beard was very much influenced by that. And there was just some great musicianship on display from all of them.
Yeah.
But I've got to be honest and say, and with no disrespect to any of the other guys, the 2 people who nailed that, if you like, that sort of that performance to the floor really solidly were Chris Squire and Alan White. And it didn't really matter what the others did, but what the others did really complemented it. But Chris and Alan, they held it together.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion, of course.
I'll tell you a funny story. I never got to see the tour at all, but in summer of '91, I was in Toronto in Canada visiting my uncle, and Much Music was the MTV of the Canadian MTV at that time. And again, at that time, in the UK, MTV and such things weren't really a thing that we had on our TV. So this was a great attraction to me. And I remember being out and one night coming in, flicking on the TV, and it came up, yes, Around the World in 80 Days. And I think it's the show from Denver. And there was 90 minutes of the show. I couldn't believe it. And I mean, that must have been, maybe July or August, when those shows probably were kind of maybe April, May time. So, and there was the whole thing, and getting to see it on TV. And what I did, I begged, stole, or borrowed from my uncle a video cassette, and I recorded it. Okay, but of course the US apologies to my Canadian friends, Canada and the UK have 2 different TV systems. But I came back to the UK with my VHS video that I knew I couldn't play. And I paid a fortune to some company that I sent it off to convert it, and it came back in very, very sketchy quality. But at least I had it.
The days when not everything was available
the same show
everywhere.
And ended up on. Mr. Kirkman will be familiar with this, but the very same show is actually one of the kind of extras on this set. So I now have it in way better quality than my sketchy.
Having said that, what you've got there, because Trevor. for American or Canadian TV. I think it was American TV. Edited, I think it was about 40 minutes, and he remixed the sound for that. What you've got on that, which I mean, I was the executive producer of that, and there's a new multiple expanded stuff with lots more video in, and that's the Denver show's in there, and it was in the round. What you've got is the rough mix of it, but it's great to see it in the round, and it's a wonderful show. I mean, it really is. And again, they all look like they're having a great time. I mean, Rick and Tony, they're like drinking buddies. They're having some, it's like they're in on some private joke. They're just having a fabulous time together. And
wasn't there a story that, I mean, I read a story that and I don't know whether this was an ARW or whether it was in this tour, but that Rick used to leave Post-it notes on Trevor Rabin's guitar with a word that he wanted him to say or sing during the show, and this was one of their little jokes apparently.
I think that was the ARW.
Was that ARW?
I don't think Rick and Trevor get on really, really well. And here's the funny thing that a lot of people don't realize. Originally, Rick was going to be in the 90125 lineup, and Chris said, "No, I don't think you and Rick will get on." And Trevor said, "The crazy thing is, we get on like a house on fire."
Yeah.
But Chris had already spoken to Tony Kaye. And of course, and Trevor said, "Tony, I love Tony. I get on great with Tony." But he said, well, the original idea was to have, Rick could have been in the 90125 lineup. But
that would have been interesting.
He said, unfortunately, I think it would have been actually, because a lot of the keyboard, I mean, Tony plays Hammond on that and a bit of piano, but most of the keyboards on that are done by Trevor. And the funny thing is, I mean, again, there's always some kind of dissent going on with the ES guys, and sometimes it's very productive in terms of what they create out of that, but sometimes it's not very productive at all. I mean, Tony said he didn't get on well with Trevor Horn, and then he didn't. He said, "I'd had enough of Yes, and I'd had enough of London." So he said, I had the job to do another Bad Finger Up, so I left and went there. And Trevor came in, and he said, "I came in and said, well, this is Tony's gear." And Trevor said, "Listen, we need to go for a cup of tea and have a chat." that was it, basically. But by the time Big Generator came along, and 90125 had been such a success all over the world, and basically the album had sold ridiculously well. The tour was the longest tour that Yes had ever done. And as Trevor said, the promoters were literally, drooling at the mouth about putting us on, and all these gigs extended. He said, "You're relatively young." They thought, "Yeah, okay, we'll do it." But he said, by the time it came to Big Generator, Tony had a lot of leverage, so he couldn't be levered out, as it were, and he took great delight in that. But he said, and it's really funny, he compared Yes to a whale. He said, when it's in the water, it's a wonderful thing. But he said, when it's on the beach, it's not very nice at all. And he said, Yes was like that. We couldn't really write in the studio. We had songs to do. He said, everybody was partying. There's this person doing this. People were there. And he said, we're giving the manager a load of grief. And he said, I've got to be honest now and say I was as well. So he said it was, not the best period in the world, really, for the band. But we managed to pull it together. But he said the Big Generator tour, I knew by the last show, which was the Atlantic celebration show in New York. He said, I knew that was the last gig. And he said, because we had a lot of discussions and John didn't like a lot of stuff. I mean, they trashed a $2 million lighting rig because nobody liked it. They had a stage set. I went, no, we don't like that. Well, we've already bought it and made it, So he said, they were the sort of silly decisions that were being made, So I imagine it was probably nice. I mean, in comparison, the Union tour must have been like a
were there? Do you know if there were any debates between the different sort of factions there about what songs get played on the set?
No. The set pretty much wrote itself. And again, back to the keyboards. The funny thing was, Tony Kaye said, I found out I'd been played because I never played And You and I. And he said, I found out, Rip, actually, you're not playing that right. It goes like this. And he said, well, actually, you've not been playing Yours Is No Disgrace, right? It goes like this. So he said, we had a laugh over that. But he says, that's the kind of camaraderie that they had. I think it was a very happy tour. And I think they were all getting on. Even Steve, and people think Steve is very standoffish and he's not very nice. He's a lovely guy. But I don't think Steve likes the circus that surrounds rock bands nowadays. And he's very sensitive and he's very introverted as well. And that's not in a horrible way. He really is the true artist and he cares about what he does musically and everything else. So I think, yeah, he was pretty happy by the tour, you know.
That's great. I'd say regret. I wish I got to see it.
I was listening back to the audio from that, and the things that I think are really the fun moments are, you know, the bit when people are playing stuff that they maybe didn't originally play on, like at the end of Owner of a Lonely Heart, they give Rick a solo, you know, and it's kind of that glimpse of that's what it must have been like. Or Rhythm of Love, I think he does one as well. And then there's, I think it's on what is it? Is it Changes, I think, that Steve Howe plays a kind of nylon string acoustic guitar doubling one of the lines. It's like, oh, that's really cool. And there's other bits where sometimes, I think particularly the guitars are probably the thing that can be a little bit hit or miss. Sometimes Trevor's playing a bit too much.
Yeah, he plays a bit too much in his own style. Yeah. I mean, but then again, you know, every artist and every musician I've ever met wants to put his own stamp on it. And I mean, people moan about, well, you know, Trevor's no Steve Howe. Yeah, well, Steve Howe was no Peter Banks. And Peter, I mean, Peter was always very disappointed by what happened and him out of the band. But, and again, everyone says, oh, Steve hates Peter. He didn't. And I, luckily, before Peter died, I spoke to him and said, he really rates you. I mean, very, very highly. He's no, you know, has no problem with you at all. And I said, his quote is, I could not have come into Yes and done what I did if Peter hadn't laid the foundation. Now that, to me, is a really good, very, very honest tribute to the previous member of the band. And of course, they made a big thing, paying time and a word, you know. Yeah. It was. I think that there's a lot of love between the Yes guys. And as I said to Steve Howe once, so it's like being in the Secret Service. You can never leave Yes, can you? You're always going to be a next member of Yes. And sometimes you get the nod to come back on and, you know, score the final goal. And, you know, it's one of those things.
And the crazy thing is, it's been since Union another 30 years of Yes continuing on, which is unimaginable, I think.
Well, I was gonna ask, do you think it could ever happen again? I mean, no. I was glancing back at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, going,
that was it. That was the time it happened.
That didn't look like much of a party.
Chris Squire and I had a long meeting when we were doing the film for Fish Out of Water. I said, look, what about this idea? And he goes, that sounds really good. And I said, what you want to do, get the Albert Hall, book it for a week, film it, record it. The original band goes on, plays a few songs, and then Peter comes off, Steve comes on, play a few more. Then Tony comes off, and then Rick comes on, and then everybody comes on, the various people, everyone who's ever been in Yes. And at the very end, you do Roundabout, quite appropriately, or Starship Trooper. And Chris went, yeah, that'd be really good. Would you put it together? And I went, no, I can't even get 5 of you to agree on something. Never mind, 18. I said, look, I'll try. And I went to speak to Bill Brooker. I went down to his house, and I said, look, would you do that? And he goes, well, that sounds like a really good idea. That would certainly be very, very popular, I'm sure. I said, well, would you do it? And he went, no. Well, I thought, well, we can't do it then, can we? Oh, it's like, you know, I love the fact that they are very individualist and they have very, 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 very personal ideas about how things should be done and how they do it. But they normally find a way of navigating through it. But sometimes it's like, no, I've done that. And Bill said to me, no, I've done one Yes reunion, I'm not doing that. That's it.
Yeah, a lot of those classic bands. I mean, you know, Robert Plant won't do Led Zeppelin again, and David Gilmour won't do Pink Floyd again, and you know, they just don't want to go there. I get it.
But they've been there, seen it, and done it. I get that too. But it's not that they're not going to play the songs,
right? Because
Gilmour will go out and play Pink Floyd songs that he wrote, and he plays songs that Roger wrote that are very important, like Comfortably Numb and Run Like Hell. But you know, it's a whole different thing going out as this big corporate, because it is, whether people like it or not, it's a big corporate entity. It's like the Yes corporate. That doesn't mean to say that John Anderson, Rick Wakeman, and Trevor Rabin can't go out and play Yes songs. I mean, we had an example of that broke the mold when, you know, you had Tony Kaye join the band for 90125, and he's playing a lot of material because they didn't play very much from the first the first 3 Yes albums. He was playing a lot of stuff that Rick and you know, had played with the band. So that's the whole thing. So the precedent had already been set. And that was the whole thing about Yes. Every time they changed the membership, which they've been doing since 1970, the newcomer had to play what the previous guy had done. Right. You know, and I think that's good, because over the years, because when you first look at when Steve Howe came in, although it was very obviously Steve Howe and he had his own style, he did give a nod to what had gone before. But as things moved on, so did Steve's appreciation of the songs, and he was able to put more into them of himself. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Totally. So, you know, and that's the way, and it's been like that with Yes all along. So it's, look, you know, they're an evolving band, and the fact that they're still here and evolving, I love that. You know.
Yeah.
Definitely. Do you guys think you could pick your top 3 songs from Union?
I can. Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, why don't you go first?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, Union, I Would Have Waited Forever, Shock to the System, and I actually like Masquerade. I do like Masquerade a lot, and I know it's very Steve Howe, and it's what you expect from Steve.
First 3 songs out of the gate. There you go.
Yeah.
What about you, Jeff?
I love them.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, you know, hard to choose. I mean, I do remember I Would Have Waited Forever, and hearing John and Chris's voices and that was pretty spectacular as an opener. I loved Lift Me Up. And yeah, you know, Miracle of Life's great too. But the one that I really like listening to it recently, Holding On, one towards the end of the album, I thought that really stood out to me as having some quite, a little bit of the production stuff that we talked about. But yeah, enjoyed it.
So that's four songs.
Yeah. Well, what John?
I like the whole album.
Yeah.
Well,
totally. I'd have to go. I mean, Lift Me Up is easily one of my favorite songs from the band ever. I know it's very much a Trevor Rabin, you know, almost solo track.
It's probably one of the rockiest tracks as well.
But I always love that. Yeah. I'd have to go Shock to the System too, which I think has just one of the best choruses in their catalog. It's so different and catchy. I just always love that. I'd probably go Miracle of Life maybe third, but Would Have Waited Forever would be right there, I guess, as well. Those are the ones for me. But yeah, I love those. If I was, you know, those things you try to if you were going to make a playlist of your favorite Yes songs, I think those make it in there for me. You know, it's not all classics type of thing.
You know, tomorrow you'd probably pick another 3.
That's right.
That's always
because
the
songs are
That's
so
always
good.
The way.
But you think, and you think, that's got to stay. But I want that then.
Well, you know what surprised me? A song like "Dangerous," which I'd sort of forgotten about as sort of a forgotten song there a little bit, and I listened to that. That came on, I went, "Oh yeah, that's really good. That's much better than I remember."
Yeah, but you also know with "Dangerous," that is a prime contender for somebody sampling. Right? I think why hasn't somebody sampled that yet? Because that's a real prime contender for somebody to come along and sample just a bit of that and go, wow, yeah. And then you reach out to a new audience entirely.
Yeah,
for sure.
2 or 3 years ago, Steve Howe put out his Anthology 2 album, and he put in it a version of Dangerous, which was from, you know, the sessions kind of before it got mashed up in the kind of in the blender. Because I think a lot of the guitar on that, it says in the credits it was Jimmy Hawn playing it. Of course, who now has come full circle into Arc of Life with the guys. But actually, when you listen to the original version, what Steve Howe played on it wasn't massively different.
No,
you know, but it did sound a lot more like Steve Howe. Funny enough, so yeah.
He's such a distinct sound.
John, there's the box set that you mentioned coming out. What can you tell us about that?
Well, what I can tell you about that is it's essentially it came out, as you know, as a 4-disc set. 10 years ago, over 10 years ago now. It's the rights are owned by Larry McGidd, who was the promoter of the Union tour.
Okay.
And for that, he paid for the rights. Concert promoters can do that. Actually, concert promoters have the right to record and film every concert they promote. They cannot use that commercially unless they have the permission of the record company, the artist, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. That's why there's a lot of stuff that Bill Graham did in the 60s and 70s that's on film and also on audio, because they have the rights. Same with Nebworth and the late, the guy who did the Nebworth shows, oh gosh, I've just forgotten his name now, where he recorded all his stuff as well. And this was, and what the problem we've got, here's the big problem. When we got from Larry McGidd said, look, the guys must get their royalties, which they are, they will, they're fully on board with this. But the actual film from Shoreline was edited. Now, again, a lot of times in the music industry, if you cut stuff out, you're not allowed to keep it. You have to destroy it. That was the ruling. We don't know where that cutout's gone because it's not the full show. The full show, I think, is the Denver show, which is on there. And we got a bootleg recording of the very first show at Pensacola. And we've also got the audio from Pensacola. So it's basically a bootleg thing. And there's some great radio broadcasts and there's some great soundboards in there as well. But it is a limited edition. Yes, are on board, but haven't generated this. It's been generated by Larry McGidd. And a lot of bands are doing, come on, let's be honest. King Crimson have been sticking out boxes with lots of bootleg material in. Some of it is not the best quality, but it's capturing a moment. And I think if you want to capture a moment from any band, I mean, as well as King Crimson, there's got to be Yes. You want to hear what they were doing then. I mean, I know there's lots of fans want to hear a live, recording from the Tales from Topographic Oceans tour. I know there is recordings because part of it was going to be as part of Yes Shows. And Yes Shows was going to be Yes Songs 2 originally. And there was going to be stuff from the Tales from Topographic Oceans tour on there. As it ended up, it was only Ritual that ended up on that show. And that was a kind of butchered version because what they'd done, a lot of it was recorded on the Tomato tour, which is the 10th anniversary. And then they decided, look, the band's changed lineup again. We'd rather do a live album. A studio album, which was Drama. And again, there was going to be a live performance of the Drama tour from Madison Square Garden. The deal was done where the multi-track desk came in. And as Rick Wakeman used to call Brian Lane, Deal a Day Lane, that the deal fell through. So the desk came out again. Then the deal was back on again, but it was too late to get it into King Biscuit. So all they took was a direct stereo feed out the soundboard. Right. So that's the best bootleg you can get from the Drama. But there's all these things going on all the time with Yes. And the great thing about Yes, and I'll say this, hand on heart, it drives me around the wall sometimes. I mean, really, up the wall. The minute you say something, it changes. Like you say, well, now they're never going to do a Union 2. Oh, Yes announced Union 2. I mean, that's the sort of thing. That is the change. That's why.
Well, listen, the ARW thing was a complete shock that happened. So
no, not really, because I can go back to 2010 when.
Well, for you it wasn't.
So, no, but I mean, Trevor said we're not going to talk about it anymore. He said because I'm getting sick of it. He said unless we actually do something. He said.
Well, right, they had talked about it forever, and then nothing ever happened. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I had it's happening. That's great. So again, what I can tell you is that they're all talking to each other now. There's no argument. All of the band, all the people who've ever been in Yes, are all now talking to each other and on good terms.
That's a great.
I'm not going to say anymore.
No, that's a great place to leave our discussion. I think that's perfect.
Apart from the stuff that's coming, there's still more stuff.
There's always more stuff. Guys, thanks for chatting on this. This was fun. John, always good to see you, my friend. And
good to see you, Roy.
We'll see you soon, hopefully.
Well, yeah, hopefully we can get to talk about Def Leppard or something as well. I mean, I love talking about music. Love to talk about it.
Absolutely.
Great to see you all.
I have to say, when Roy floated this idea, I went, really? You want to do a podcast about the album that most Yes fans think is one of their worst albums? Are you mad?
Yeah.
But actually, sorry, I will say it here publicly. He was right. It's been really fun revisiting it. My closing thought on it was this. I thought about this the other night. If this had been a Jon Anderson solo album, right, with everybody else guesting, because he did kind of mastermind it, I reckon it would probably be one of his best certainly his best solo album since the 1970s.
The guy's
if you listen
really
to it
creative.
in that way,
he's really creative. He sometimes you have to bear in mind that Relay was going to be a dance album according to John, and it ended up something totally different. But that's the great thing about all of those. There's never been any passengers on the Yes bus. Everyone has been there for a reason. And we got to see 8 of those members displaying exactly why there are no passengers on the Yes bus. And I think it would be wonderful to see again. Whether we do, I think no, but hey, you haven't said it, who knows?
Yeah, I might doubt it, but hey, you never know. You never know. All right, guys, have a good night. We'll talk to you
great to
soon.
speak to you guys.
Thanks.
You take care.
Good to see you,
Thanks.
John.
Bye.
Cheers,
Bye.
mate. Bye. Bye.